bit different. So we're talking about doing something a little bit different in this series. Instead of just talking about a topic, we're going through a book together. So every once in a while, we'll take a book of the Bible and we'll just go through the whole book. So we're doing the book of Colossians. And if you're in a small group, we are starting to study that in our small groups too. So the passage that I'll teach on today, we'll have discussion questions for your small group. So you'll read it again in your small group and you get a chance to talk about it and pray about it and apply it to your life. So we're trying to put this all together seamlessly, and we'll see how it goes. All right. So last week we kind of introduced the book of Colossians, and if you are new to church or you're new to the Bible or maybe unfamiliar with the Bible, that's okay. We're glad that you're here, and in fact, that's one of the reasons we started this church 8 years ago, was to help people kind of rediscover or discover for the first time faith in God and community. And so the book of Colossians is a short letter, basically, that one of the earliest followers of Jesus, his name is Paul, and he wrote multiple of the letters that we read in the New Testament, so the part of the Bible written after Jesus. And so this is basically a letter to a church in a city called Colossae, and why it's called Colossians. And this was a time when there was a new church, okay? So this guy we talked about last week, Epaphras, he goes and plants this new church in Colossae. It's a lot of weird words. Stick with me. And they're doing pretty good. And so Paul's saying, hey, it's great. I've heard good things about you, but I've also heard that you're kind of living in this city where there's two different kind of parties that are trying to influence your church. And so you've got this one that's trying to convince you that you need to live like all the rules of the Jewish religion and trying to pull you back into that. And then you've got this other kind of really mystical trying to say that Jesus isn't the only God. He's just one of many gods. And so, the Greeks had a lot of gods, and so there's one of many gods. And you're going to see, especially today, Paul is specifically writing the book of Colossians to combat those two things. And so he's trying to say it's neither this nor that. It's this. It's something else. Christianity is something else. It's built different. And so followers of Jesus are built different. And that's really, I'll tell you what, it's kind of difficult to take a book of the Bible and try to think of a theme. So we try to do both those together. There's a lot of themes that you could pull out of the book of Colossians. But so what we're trying to say is, as we read through the book of Colossians, we're going to see how Paul thinks Christians should live differently. And this is kind of the one verse that we're going to revisit every week just to keep it in front of us. It's kind of in the middle of the book. He says, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live your lives in him. So he's encouraging them, don't get pulled to the right or to the left by these competing ideologies, these narratives that are popular in your culture, but instead stay true to the word as it was first spoken to you, rooted and built up in Jesus. So we have our roots down in Jesus. We are built different. We're built like someone built on the word of God, strengthened in the faith as you were taught, and overflowing with thankfulness. So that's kind of the introduction there to the whole series, kind of where we're headed. So today we're just going to continue on where we left off. We're still in the first chapter of Colossians. And so this, I don't know if you have all enjoyed these instructions. Does anybody remember has anybody ever built IKEA furniture? Okay. So I'll tell you kind of a neat fatherhood moment for me recently. Elliot is my son, and Elliot and Lizzie got married recently, and they have an apartment. And I showed up at their house, and he looked like me 20 years ago. It was like I walked back in time. He was on the floor, and there was pieces of wood everywhere. And the little knobs that you stick in one side and they're supposed to stick in the other, and some of them are a little too thick, so then you have to hammer them in. Some of them are too small, and so you stick them in the hole, and then when you move it, it falls out. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Those little things. And then they have the little circle things that you're supposed to say, oh, this will work great. You stick it in, turn it, and that never works. So and it was great to see the incredible frustration on his face. It made me feel so good to see that I had passed on my impatience, my easy to be angry. Although you didn't break anything, which is the generations are getting more and more mature, right? Yeah. My dad's general way he builds things, if he can't figure out quickly, he gets a hammer, right? And just hit it. So we were getting better. But it was funny to watch him have kind of the same frustrations and the same, why are these instructions so frustrating? And I love nowadays instructions that have less and less words. Have you noticed that? It's more just pictures. I can barely see. So I get like my reading glasses on. And I'm like, what is that a picture of? I can't tell. Which piece is this talking about? I put together a cabinet for Matea recently, and it had like 40 pages of instructions. It took me days. It was really a labor of love. Good thing I love her. But my question is, are you the kind of person who follows instructions when you build stuff? Or are you the kind of person like my wife who starts to build it until she gets stuck and then goes and gets the instructions? Who are the non-instruction followers? Come on, some of you, yeah, Monica, there we go. You could probably tell us, Monica is a therapist, she could tell us why certain people are wired that way probably, right? But there's something, some of us just think, I can probably figure it out. And here's the thing, I think I could probably figure it out, but I am such a rule follower. And no one's even watching over my shoulder, right? Like, it's not a moral issue. I'm not going to get in trouble. I have to read the instructions. When I was in 3rd grade, my teacher traumatized me for life. And so I'm a straight A student. I always get A's. That is part of my identity and my personality. And if that's like who I am to the core, right? And so did you like turn just one light on today? I feel like if I take one step this way, it's all of a sudden I'm in darkness. He hates when I walk, so he's found a way. I'm like standing right here. I won't be moving today. That's even better. Okay, it's good. Okay, so in 3rd grade, I start doing this test, okay? And you're just going down the test, and it's got questions and answers and questions and answers and questions and answers. And then the last section has a little piece of instruction that says, don't do any of the questions above this. Just do the ones below it. And there was one more question. And she got us all. And her lesson was read all the instructions before you take the test. I have to read all the instructions. You never know. It could be like step 40 is like, actually don't do the step 39, do step 40. So I always read the instructions. I was looking for IKEA and I found this one. I thought this was kind of funny. Can you see it? Oh, that's pretty funny. Okay. So house. Actually, there's a lot of ripoffs of IKEA. If you just want to spend some time this afternoon Googling, it was pretty funny. Some of them less appropriate than others. All right, so we're going to talk today about the blueprint for our lives. That Jesus gives us a blueprint for our lives. But first, we're going to jump into this big section here. Can you read that? Probably not. You don't need to read this. Okay, this is just to show you something real quick. This is all the verses we're going to do today, and in your Bible, it kind of all runs together, but I want to just show you there's a poem. So a lot of theologians, a lot of scholars think that those first 2 sections you see there are together a poem that was probably something that was said at church a lot at this time, like within the first couple years of Jesus raising from the dead and ascending to heaven. And you'll see why. It's got some standard truths that you would hear people talk about. And it's kind of broken into 2 stanzas. So I want to show this to you we're going to look at the first part, the second part, and the third part, okay? But I'm going to make it bigger. Ready? Here we go. So what we're going to talk about today is this section here is going to give us answers to some of the biggest questions of our lives. Who is God and who am I? And it's going to show us kind of a blueprint for reality. And I think that's super important, and how Christians, people who follow Jesus, we choose to be built different. So here's the first stanza of this little poem. The Son is the image of the invisible God. As you read this, just kind of think about all of the words. There's like lots of hyperlinks back to other parts of the Old Testament in here, and there's a lot of thoughts that we should be picking up. He is the firstborn over all creation, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. You think Paul's trying to make a point here? He just repeats it over and over and over again. This should, if you are someone who knows the Bible, this should hyperlink you back to Genesis, okay? That he is talking about, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? That should be, and so when Paul was writing, he was writing to a primarily Jewish audience. They would have gotten that. They would have understood that was to be connecting Jesus to the creator of the universe. This isn't an accident. It's not poetic, like it's not like an allegory. He's really saying Jesus is the person. He is the same being that was there from the beginning before all things, and he created all things. Okay? And then he goes on to the second stanza. So this first part is God as creator, Jesus as creator. And then we get into Jesus as a recreator. He's coming in again to a broken people and bringing healing. He is the head of the body, the church. So he is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, right? Talk about his resurrection, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, right? So just think about those people who have a narrative that Jesus is just one of the many gods. No, he is the one and only God. Through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. And so what a reader of his time would pick up here would be hyperlinks back to Exodus. And now it's escaping me. It's either 20 or 40. Forgive me. It's one of those two. Exodus, where there's this story where the temple is built and the presence of God, the fullness of his glory fills the temple. And it's this symbol of God's presence being with the Israelites. And so this fullness of God would be a hyperlink back to there. And there's also hyperlinks back to Proverbs 8 and multiple Psalms that talk about this person who will come and who will suffer on behalf of other people. So this, sometimes when you read the Bible, you get the first Passover and it's like, yeah, that's so cool. And then if you spend some time digging, you're like, whoa, there's layers and layers and layers. And this is why we talk about the Bible, even though it's written over, 1,500 years and 60 plus authors, that it is a unified story. It's a unified narrative telling about Jesus, all leading up to him. And so you can find these connections all through. And so we'll just finish it out. He says, once you, so it kind of goes from Jesus the creator to Jesus the recreator, right? Like he's bringing new life. And then he talks about the effect it has on our lives. Once you were alienated from God. You were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you through Christ's physical body, through death, to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. And this is the gospel that you've heard. Remember last week, we talked about that, right? This gospel that's been preached and is producing fruit all over the world, and also is producing fruit in their lives. And that's how the letter kind of started. This is the gospel that you heard and has been preached to every creature under heaven, in which I, Paul, have become a servant. A little bit of hyperbole there on Paul's part. Obviously, it hasn't been preached to every creature under heaven at that point, but he's just saying it's spreading like wildfire, okay? And so, what did we learn about Jesus? So we got these two questions. Who is Jesus and who am I? That's where we want to spend some time, okay? Who is Jesus? So Jesus is the image and fullness of the very God. And you have to think about, he's writing this, like that, for some of you who were raised in church, you're like, duh. Like that's basically what we believe. Number one, it's nice to see where in the Bible we get some of these beliefs from, okay? Number two, the people he's writing this to, these are people who had seen Jesus, who had maybe heard his teachings, or who hadn't seen Jesus but had met his disciples. And they're like, yeah, this guy who was on earth like a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades ago, they're making the claims right out of the gate that he's God. So these are radical, powerful, life-changing, earth-changing claims that Jesus was not. And some people even today would try to argue that the Bible doesn't teach that Jesus thought he was God, that the Bible just teaches he was a really strong moral teacher. But Jesus, and we'll see in a second, Jesus knew and proclaimed and taught that he was not only just the Messiah, but that he was the Son of God. Okay? So he, in Jesus, is the fullness of God. Whatever questions you might have about who God is, you can look at Jesus to see. He was the firstborn. Is not saying he was born. It's saying that he has the authority above all other beings, okay? That he is not created. He is the creator. He created all things. They are all created for him. They're all created through him. What's even more amazing, in my opinion, is he's still holding everything together. Somehow, by the word of Jesus, the world stays together. All the atoms and molecules and the universe is all held together. Not only that, he's the head of the church. So he is the leader and the source of who we are as a church. He has also overcome death. He's overcome sin. He's the only person to have ever done that. So it's just a big deal. Jesus is a big deal. That's what the summary is, okay? Here's my question. My question's coming. Cliffhanger, ready? I wanted to read a couple more verses. We've read a lot. You guys okay? All right. So, I don't believe you. I just want to show you a couple more verses because, well, for one, like I said, Jesus being God is kind of important to our faith. So I just want to belabor the point, okay? Let's just look at a few more. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to God except through me. It's a big claim. If you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. You would know God. If you knew me, you would know God. Here's why. From now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. When have they seen him? When have they seen the Father? The Bible tells us that you can't see God and live, that he dwells in unapproachable light. But now he's saying you've seen him. Philip says, Lord, when have we seen him? Right? Jesus says, don't you know me? Don't you know me? Even after I've been among you for so long? You've never seen God, but now you have seen God. When have we seen God? Don't you know me? Anyone who has seen me has seen God. How can you say, show us the Father? I and the Father are one. Right? Huge claims by Jesus. John wrote this about Jesus. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. The writer of Hebrews says this, in the past, God spoke to our ancestors through prophets at many times and in various ways, but in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son, who he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. Sound familiar? The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. Okay. I mean, this is it. This is a big deal. Jesus, I have talked to so many people, even people who were raised in the church, and they're like, I just don't know, I just still don't get the whole Jesus and God, and how is Jesus here and God? And yeah, the whole idea around what the Bible or what the theologians call the Trinity, like God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, 3 in 1, confusing, but not impossible. And so I'm not here to teach on the Trinity today, but I am here to just say, before we can take our next step, we need to hear, if we're going to study the book of Colossians, this is a big premise in the book of Colossians, is that Jesus is God. And not just a God. He is the God who created all things and created the universe and created even things that are invisible. He created things like beauty. He created wisdom. He created authority. He didn't just create mountains, which in and of itself would be impressive. He created things invisible and visible. He created not just earth, he created heaven. And not only did he create it, but it was created for him. All of that it's not just by him, it's for him. It's about him. It's unto him. All of creation, right? There's a point where Jesus is hanging out with some people, and these people are saying, basically, you are God, we praise your name. And the people are like, tell those people to shut up. That's blasphemy. And Jesus said, well, if they stop, the rocks will start singing. I don't know if he was making a joke or not, but all of creation will sing to the King of Kings. I mean, I just want to elevate how we think of Jesus, okay? So, that's my big question I had coming. So what? Why does this matter for you? Here's a couple thoughts and where I think we can go with Colossians, okay? The first thing is, when we're talking about being built different, Jesus defines, he is the blueprint for reality. And so there's a lot of questions in this world today about what is true and what is important. And for us as followers of Jesus, and if you're not a follower of Jesus, the invitation is to see that there is truth. There is absolute, not relative truth in Jesus. That Jesus establishes reality, much like he established the planets and the stars and all of the universe, but that he speaks, his word is true. That what he says is the fabric of reality. I heard a teacher once talk about how when Jesus teaches, sometimes he just says how things are instead of telling you what is true. Right? So he'll say, it is better to give than to receive. He's not saying, hey, you should give and not receive. He's just describing reality. In the reality that God has created, it is better to give than to receive. God has created the reality. And so the same teacher talked about how we can either, like, have you ever rubbed your hand on a piece of wood the wrong way? Right? We can either live against the grain of how the universe has been created, which would be walking against how God would call us to walk, or we can walk with the way. It is better to give than to receive. And as I am generous, I discover more of who God is, and my life is full. But if I am greedy and miserly and I hold on to my stuff, I'm going against the grain of how God created the universe to be. Does that make sense? So number one is, so what? He defines reality. So if you are looking for what is true, how do I live my life? If God has the blueprint for creation, he certainly has the blueprint for your life. The second thing I would say is God is deserving of our worship. And so worship's kind of a weird word. Not a lot of people outside of the church use it these days. No one is like, I worship money. I would like everyone to know on my Instagram story that I worship money. I have a shrine with a big dollar bill on it, and I bow before it every day. We all worship, though. Every human worships. We're created to worship, and we give our devotion and allegiance to something or someone. We worship, and in our society, what are the things? What are the gods, lowercase g, in our society? Is it not money or esteem or power or influence, right? We even call people influencers, right? Like, you're an influencer. That's an actual job that you can make money at now these days, right? Like, that is, we worship that. We want more of it. We spend our money and our time, our attention. We mimic it. We try to become like it, right? We worship athletes. We worship politicians. No one would ever say that, right? No one would ever say, I worship a politician. But look at your actions. Look at what you do. Think about your thought life. It's really interesting. I've been reading in the Bible, in the Old Testament, this book called Isaiah, and it's a tough book to get through. I'm just gonna be honest. And it's like back and forth. It's like, Israel, you're making tons of mistakes, but God's gonna save you. And that's it. Every other chapter. You stink, I'll help you. You're terrible, I'll help you. It's just back and forth. And at one point, there's this, I think, kind of humorous section where Isaiah is writing from God to the Israelites about their obsession with idols. And so in that time, their idols were actual idols. And he said, you guys make no sense. You go cut down a tree and you take some of the wood and you burn it for fire to warm yourself. And then you take another part of it and you carve an idol. And while you're sitting by the fire, you worship it. And he's like, God's like, don't you get that makes no sense? Like, the same wood that you cook your bread over, you're acting like you can worship it and it'll do nothing for you. I was reading through that and my first instinct was, that's just so primitive. Like, we don't do that kind of stuff anymore, right? That doesn't really apply to us anymore. And then I was like, wow, we really do that. Like, we really do that still. I mean, how many things in your life are you hoping will give you the things that God should give you? Like inner peace, security, strength, direction, identity. These things should all come from God. And yet money, like, we're like, if I just have more money, I will feel secure. If I just have more friends, I will have inner peace. If I just have more stuff, I will feel better about my identity. If I have more followers, right? Like, it's interesting how we make idolatry, which is like an old word that no one says anymore. We make it like sound like it's obsolete, but maybe it's more powerful than ever. I mean, just think about the power of some of the narratives that we have in our culture right now and how they run against the grain of who Jesus is and what he says reality is. There's I didn't even mention sex. Think about that. Like, that is a God that people worship, isn't it? It is. So Jesus is to be above everything else in our lives. So right now, nothing else that I say matters, and you could leave like she is. Thanks, Ashley. That was a great timing. I really appreciate it. That's so mean of me. I should not have done that. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Jesus should be, it's so mean. Good thing we're friends, right? Maybe not anymore, but okay. In our lives, Jesus is inviting us to make him first. So all the things that you worship and I worship, and let's just admit it. Can we just admit it? There are things that we worship a little bit. And we wouldn't say it, and we don't want to say it, we don't want to believe it, but like Jesus needs to come first. Jesus needs to come before our family commitments. Even though family commitments are good, Jesus needs to come before our dependence on money for security. So like my dependence on Jesus for security should come before my dependence on money for security. My dependence on Jesus for identity should come before anything else that I define. Who are you? Right? How do you decide who you are? Jesus should be at the top of all of those lists. If he is the firstborn of all creation, the first one to raise from the dead, if all of creation is created by him, for him, and through him, and he holds all things together, he should probably be first on your list. Right? Like he should be the first person you call when you're in trouble. Like if you, in the old days, you had these speed dial buttons on your phone. Like he should be number one. He shouldn't be 3 or 4, right? We should go to Jesus first. And the third thing I would say, so what, isn't it incredible that the creator of the universe cares anything about you? That is mind-blowing. You don't deserve it, especially some of you. Josh wasn't here last week, and I feel like he missed getting made fun of. And so, you know, when you are partial Christian who barely comes to church, I mean, everyone else was here, weren't we, guys? I don't know why you thought you could take a week off. Clearly. We need to pray for Josh after church today. So, I forget the point I was making. Something about Jesus, probably, right? Okay. So, isn't it amazing that Jesus loves us, that he cares for us? There's crazy, crazy verses in the New Testament where Jesus says, the Father loves you so much. Like he's like, he knows every hair on your head, right? He knows every hair on your head. And I make the same joke about Tom every time, and I won't do it this time, Tom. But he knows every hair on your head. That's like the point of that is he's intimately involved. The guy who holds, like there's stars that we are seeing right now that are millions of light years away, who's actually the star's dead now, but we're still seeing the light from it, which I don't fully grasp. All of that, like have all of the like molecules that are held together, like if the earth rotated on just like a tiny bit of a different axis, or if we were a tiny bit closer to the sun, like all these things, we wouldn't even exist anymore. Like go look up the video about, what's the video? The cosmological argument for the existence of God. Go look it up. It's incredible. So many things are, if you moved it by a hair, we wouldn't exist anymore. God's holding all of that together right now. And I'm kind of like, keep focused on that, right? Like, it's okay if no, I'm just joking. He's not limited, right? He's not limited. He gives us, your life, the things that seem trivial. Wouldn't you say that some of the stuff in your life is trivial compared to the rotation of the universe, right? Like, okay, I know some of us have big egos, but even you have to admit you're not as important as that. And yet he actually thinks you are. He thinks you are more important. He came to die for you and your sins and me and my sins. I think we could spend some time meditating on how crazy that is. If you're a Christian who's been a Christian for a long time, don't let the most important truth of all become commonplace to you. Okay? Don't let that become like, meh, right? Like, receive that, meditate on that. We should be, right? Doesn't David said, like, renew in me the joy of my salvation. It's incredible that the God of the universe, who holds all things in his hands, knows your name, cares about, like, there is no prayer you can pray that's too small for God to care about. That's wild. Okay, so God, he's a good God, and he loves you. If Jesus gave us the blueprints for creation, we can look to him for the blueprints of our lives. So that's where I want to just transition as we wrap up here. So he was the one who gave us the blueprints for creation. He created all things hold together in him. And then he kind of transitions into this third part that we read about. And he says, you have been reconciled to God through death, his death, to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. And so what this does for us is it gives us standing. It tells us who we are. So I'm going to tell you a story that I hope explains this a little bit. So I have been involved in youth ministry for my whole entire life. And there was an event that I took over at one point called the Winter Retreat. And so I was the East region, we're in the Vineyard. It's a movement of 500 churches in America, 2,000 across the world. And America's broken up into regions. And so I was the youth leader, kind of helping other youth leaders in the East region for like a decade. And so I led this thing called the Winter Retreat. And so I was in charge, right? And I would show up early. I would help set everything up. I would take care of the speakers and the bands. And we had like a little special room in the back that like we would go into, like the green room, right? Go back there. And like everyone had tons of questions for me. I was on stage all the time. And then I handed it off. And it took a couple of years, but now I go to the Winter Retreat and no one knows who I am. It is crazy. And I am not in charge. I don't show up early, but I don't have the same access. Like I probably could, but I don't go backstage and go to the green room. That'd be weird. I don't go up on stage and lead things. There was something 2 years ago, they were having sound issues, and a couple people came to me. They're like, Christian, can you go tell them? And I was like, no, I actually have no authority anymore. I'm not in charge. Don't have the same standing. I don't have the same authority. I'm just a dude here now, you know? And so I want you to think about that and reverse it. What Jesus did is he completely altered your standing before God and in the world, right? So if you go back and read those words, those are, wait, wrong way. Those are a bunch of religious words, holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. That is not something you can do for yourself. That's not something I can do for myself. I can't take away all of my sin. I can't make myself without blemish is like Old Testament language that all the people, again, reading this would have known. This is talking about perfection. Like you are not perfect. And what Jesus did is he took all of your imperfection and wiped the slate clean for you so that you're standing before God. Some of us know this, but can you imagine that God sees you as holy right now? Like he sees you as clean and pure and holy in his sight. You're standing before him. This is why we can come before God with boldness, is because he doesn't look at our sin. He doesn't look at our shortcomings. He doesn't look at our rebellion in our hearts. He sees the work that Jesus did, and he calls us holy. He calls us righteous. We are free from accusation. That is mind-blowing. So the first thing that this does about who I am is it gives me standing. It tells me who I am. I am a son of God. You are a son or a daughter of God. And you can stand on that. When you hear thoughts of accusation or thoughts of condemnation, or when you struggle with insecurity or self-doubt, when you struggle with shame or guilt, or you think about the things you've done that you regret, we have standing in God to say, no, I'm holy and righteous. I am without blame. I am free from accusation because of Jesus. It's radical. So the first section invited us to worship. I think the second section invites us to obedience, because the next verse, he says, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, built, we are a people who are built different because we live our lives according to the blueprints of the creator of the universe. That's who I am. He says who I am, and then I have a choice to live that out or not. And this is going to come in 2 weeks. We're going to get to this section where he's going to really lean into obedience. So if you want to skip a Sunday, that's a good one. Okay? There can be an empty room that day. All right? But suffice it to say, like this is the point of this section for me, is that if he is the blueprint creator of the cosmos, it would be foolish of me to not make him the blueprint creator of my life. Right? And so he invites us to worship, and then in this text, and then he invites us to obedience. Will I surrender my life to God? Will I say, your will, not my will? Your way, not my way. Your ways are higher than my ways. Your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. Right? That I want to be defined differently. And so I want to just close by taking one more step in a direction that is not necessarily in the text. Okay? So this isn't necessarily coming out of the text, but I think that there's other verses that obviously support this. So he talks about creation, and then he talks about a new creation, right? You and I are this new creation. We're created new, holy, blameless in his sight. We have this invitation to continue to live our lives out. This is how he says that he is the image of the invisible God. The church is the image of Jesus now. And so our job is to show what following Jesus, what a community of believers, what community in heaven is supposed to look like. So let me tell you just one more quick illustration. Have you ever traveled to a foreign country? How many people have traveled to a foreign country? Yeah, okay. So I'm reading a book. I read fiction books pretty much obsessively. It's like my hobby. I read them all the time. And the stuff I read about is pretty much the same thing. I usually find a dude who's ex-military and then lives his life off the grid and solves people's problems. I don't know why I like it. I read them and I'm like, this is so dumb. This could never happen. And then I'm like, I better read another one. So, but I'm reading one right now that is by a British author, and he uses words that I've never heard before. And so he's like, the dude was driving his car, and it was really hard to see through the windscreen. I was like, the windscreen? Right? And then he pulled over onto the margin of the road. I was like, margin? Right, it's the shoulder. Okay, so there's all these words. There's like 20 different vocab words that I've learned now that British people use, apparently. And I didn't understand any of it. That's just a small example. I've been in other cultures where, like, we went to Germany when I graduated high school. My dad and I took a trip to Europe together. And, you drive, in certain countries, you drive on the other side of the road, right? Like, than we do in America. It's wild. Here's what I'm trying to say. Like, if you've ever been in another culture, you get, like, what's called culture shock, right? It's like, oh, they have different food. They speak a different language. The time's different. The traffic goes a different way. They smell bad. Maybe sometimes. Okay. That's what we're supposed to be doing. When you look at how Christians live, it should be culture shock for people who don't follow Jesus. Do you understand what I'm saying? We should be introducing the culture of Christianity, the culture of Jesus, the culture of heaven. Like, people should see us living different because we live according to a different blueprint. We are a people, they should be looking at us and saying, wow, you live with so much peace, even when life is anxious. Wow, you live with so much generosity, even when stuff is tight for you. You are someone who's constantly working out relationships. You aren't someone who's talking behind people's back. You aren't someone who gossips. You aren't someone who's constantly got drama around their lives. You actually walk towards people who are different than you. You care for people who have nothing that they can give to you. You live sacrificially. You're constantly asking how you can help other people. You are just overflowing with kindness and love. You don't ever talk bad about your enemies or people you disagree with. Like, the community of believers, if we are really flowing, according to what Scripture teaches, and we're going to see more of this in Colossians, we should be this bright spot that people, when they come into it, they're like, it's like a positive culture shock. It's like, wow, this is how it's supposed to be. There's something in people who are longing for the community that Jesus creates. And when they come to church, when they meet a Christian, that's what's supposed to happen. Christians are supposed to look and live so different that it's a breath of fresh air when people walk into it. Isn't that a beautiful idea? It is, isn't it? Now, it's way harder to live that out. And we see the struggle in our daily life. We see it in ourselves. And it would be easy for us to be like, well, we're doing a great job at that, but all these other Christians are complete losers, right? That's what you sometimes hear. We're not going to do that. We're going to own it. It starts with me. It starts with the time that I was at the side of a soccer game 10 years ago and I lost my temper and threw my coffee mug across the ground and screamed at the coach. That was me. Yeah, that was me. That was somebody's impression of a pastor, right? That they probably took with them for years, It's all of us. But this opportunity, this is what we want to lean towards at City Light. We talk about our vision being seek, love, and care for people like Jesus does. And the love part is we want to create a community where we love God and love each other. And man, I've been so impressed with our community as we've gone through so much the past few months. And I just want to lean into that. Let's keep being that. Let's keep showing the love of Jesus for each other and for the community that we live in, because this is the biblical picture of a community that is following Jesus, where others can come and find love, acceptance, healing. They can find direction. They can find correction. They can find brothers and sisters when they don't have it. They can find mothers and fathers when they don't have it. That's what the church is supposed to look like. And so I just want to end with that kind of exclamation point to this passage. This is one of the most powerful, theologically rich passages that we're going to visit here in the book of Colossians. Worship team, you guys can come up. All right, so I think I have one more slide here. No, I do not. So who is God and who am I? Who is God and who am I? If he has the blueprint for creation, then he has the blueprint for your life and for my life. And we can have confidence that we will follow him and find truth, we'll find peace, we'll find identity, we'll find purpose, we'll find healing. All of that is in him when we follow him.